Hi guys, thanks for stopping by tonight. We're lifting the candle on the most whispered corners of medieval bedrooms. We'll slip beneath rough wool blankets, discover how couples carved moments of privacy, what the church actually forbade, why city brothels paid taxes, and how that infamous chastity belt became a later myth. You'll hear about pungent bath routines, risky herbal birth control, and the poetry of forbidden courtly love. If raw, relatable history excites you, smash like, hit subscribe, and comment below with the medieval rumor you believed before today. Ready to time travel? Let's jump in together right now, friends. Picking up from our candle-lit prologue, let's duck beneath the smoke-blackened lintel of a 13th century cottage at dusk. The room we enter is no bigger than a modern garage, yet it contains an entire universe of duty, devotion, and desire. Smoke from the central hearth curls up to meet a thatch ceiling darkened by decades of soot, mingling with the sour-sweet odor of packed earth, dried rushes, and animal breath. A single glowing ember is not merely heat. It is the fragile heartbeat of the household, and everything marriage, motherhood, even morality must negotiate its faint red pulse. Picture the layout. A rectangle of beaten clay floor, polished by countless bare feet. A hearth pit smoldering in the center. And in each corner, objects that announce both poverty and practicality. Against the north wall rests the family's proudest possession, a heavy oak great bed, wide enough for 2 grown bodies, and perhaps a swaddled infant. Its linen sheets smell of wood smoke and lye. Its straw mattress, lumpy but precious, is refilled each harvest with chaff left from threshing. At the footboard hang woolen blankets airing in the last daylight before closing around the sleepers like a rustic canopy. To the east, a trestle table folds in on itself after supper, freeing floor space for 2 low pallets where older children sleep head to toe. Poultry flutter in wicker cages near the door. A lamb with a splinted leg lies beside a basket of turnips sharing the same air, and come nightfall, the same fleas. Privacy is not simply rare, it is inconceivable. Walls are thin as memory, and every word sinks straight into straw. Yet families keep expanding. Church law and economic necessity see to that, so domestic creativity must fill the gap. By custom, the village curfew bell rings at sunset, warning that open flames must be banked. After the alehouse closes, adults tramp home along rutted lanes, guided by moonlight and muscle memory. Inside, the wife lifts the stew pot. One last time, buries a heated poker in gray ashes to preserve fire till dawn, and murmurs a prayer that wolves, both literal and figurative, keep their distance. The youngest children already snore softly, exhaling little clouds in the cold air. Teenage siblings pretend to sleep, but listen keenly. Every creak, cough, or giggle echoes like a shout. Court rolls and church penance manuals reveal how ingenious peasant couples became under these conditions. Some waited for rainstorms, letting thunder disguise any accidental sigh. Others seized the liminal hour just before dawn, when children slept deepest and roosters had not yet advertised sunrise. Household folklore advised muffling creaky bedboards with folded blankets and inverting a wooden bowl over the lone tallow candle so silhouettes could not betray movement on the wall. Soft songs, half lullaby, half love note, might drift across the room, their meaning hidden beneath harmless melodies. Silence, however, carried a moral weight. The medieval church taught that marital relations were permissible only when performed with restraint, aimed at procreation, and scheduled on nights free from religious interdictions, a list so long it covered nearly half the calendar. Saints' vigils, fasting days, Advent, Lent, Fridays, Sundays, each appeared in manuals as a red-inked no. A farmer's wife therefore counted beads as carefully as she counted eggs. When a green flag finally appeared on her mental calendar, She still had to weigh desire against the risk of waking a restless toddler or knocking over the candle, yet tenderness survived. Folktales mention spouses placing warm river stones at each other's feet beneath the covers, an act of both comfort and courtship. Fragmentary lullabies record a mother humming to her nursing infant while her husband clasps her hand in the dark, their whispers weaving with the goat's gentle bleats. Love adapts, squeezing itself into moments as narrow as the space between two straw mattresses. In these cramped quarters, even shared silence could feel like an embrace. The price of discovery, though, could be steep. English manorial rolls describe fines levied on couples caught filthy and uncovered after the night watchman made his rounds. Confessors' handbooks urged priests to quiz penitents about positions, noises, and timing, turning the confessional into a second, more judgmental bedroom. A husband penalized for nocturnal unseemliness might lose half a week's wage, enough grain to feed the family until Pentecost. Shame traveled faster than disease in tight villages, so the next attempt at tenderness grew even quieter. Architectural change came slowly. By the late 14th century, a few prosperous yeomen added lofts or solars, granting parents a wooden cubbyhole above the main hall. Gossip about these elevated love nests traveled quickly. Privacy was so novel, it almost felt illicit. Yet for most families, the arrangement remained what social historians call the one-room life. Diaries of French serfs and Italian mezzadri echo a shared refrain: livestock inside for heat children, beside for safety saints, above watching every move. Imagine a final winter tableau. Snow presses against the shutter, muting the outside world. The ember glows like a red star. Children's breaths rise in tiny ghostly wisps. The goat sighs, curls her legs, and dreams of pasture. The wife, heart-hammering, draws her husband's calloused hand beneath the blankets. Words are unnecessary, they might be dangerous, but their breathing aligns a wordless liturgy older than any monk's chant. For a fleeting minute, the room dissolves. Only two pulses remain. From unions forged in hush emerged the next generation of field hands, milkmaids, and future parents who would repeat the same careful steps. Grand chronicles celebrate knights and kings, but civilization endured because two exhausted peasants once dared to trust a moment of darkness. Their courage to love softly and unseen kept medieval knights alive, and in a wider sense kept humanity moving forward. Keep that ember of intimacy glowing in your imagination as we head into point 2, where warmth escapes the cottage and resurfaces in freshly plowed fields, ever onward. Point 1 ended with Tom and Maud stealing a breath of warmth beneath a blanket. Point 2 widens the lens from the cramped cottage to the vast clockwork of the medieval church, whose calendar dictates when that breath may be taken at all. Long before sunrise, a single bell from St. Giles drifts across the frozen fields, one hollow note that turns private desire into public business. The bell announces matins, but also resets the ledger of permitted and forbidden nights, a shifting puzzle every couple must solve before dusk returns. Walk the lane, and you see the code painted on the parish wall, rings and crosses marking days of abstinence. Sundays are barred. So are Fridays for the crucifixion and Wednesdays for Judas. Add Advent, Lent, Ember Days, Rogation Tide, and Saintly Vigils, and half the year disappears. For Tom and Maud, the list is more than doctrine. It is a household obstacle course. Procreation is encouraged, but only on schedule, and only in the missionary posture praised by confessors as most natural. Everything else, time, position, even volume, can be weighed, taxed, or condemned. Yet parchment rules collide with muddy reality. Tom rises before dawn to feed the goat, reciting the week's prescriptions like a weather report. Maud at the hearth tracks her cycle and the midwife's warnings. A family therefore navigates between priest-healer and hunger, A bumper crop needs sons. A lean spring dreads another mouth. When law and livelihood clash, the cottage bends without breaking. Confession exposes the tension. Father Osbert, ink-stained and stern, sits in a side chapel every Thursday with the penitential of Burchard of Worms. 3 days fasting for intimacy during Advent. 7 if on a vigil. 14 if sound woke the children. Parishioners kneel, speaking in formulas drawn from the same book. Osbert imposes penances of bread and water, yet in secret he shortens them for households that tithe well or serve on the manor jury. The reeve has his own stake. Empty cribs mean fewer hands at harvest, so he often overlooks a Lent conception if the couple owes labor dues. In alehouse corners, men gripe that Rome knows neither frost nor plow, while women trade herbs to blunt pregnancies when grain runs low. The market joins in, alongside eggs and cheese peddlers sell parchment wheels whose arrow finds a lawful knight. Folk humor turns repression into a carnival game. Candlemas February 2nd displays the machine at full volume. Wax candles gleam. Choir boys chant, and Osbert roars. Marriage is a sacrament, not lechery. Maud balances her infant and wonders how sacramental love fits in a room shared with coughing children and a goat. After mass villagers buy indulgences, a penny a sack of onions to shave years off purgatory for relations rumored to have loved too loudly. Doctrine and commerce mingle like smoke and incense. Legal ink preserves the struggle. Manorial rolls from Shrewsbury fine couples for carnal commerce during Lent, and boisterous betting on Our Lady's Day. Babies born suspiciously close to banned periods carry whispers like invisible birthmarks. Their mothers carry heavier ones. Ingenuity blooms in the cracks. A widowed alewife rents her scullery for conversation, spinning her painted chart of acceptable nights before taking coins. The village tacitly approves, preferring discreet trysts to scandals in hedgerows. People do not merely endure the timetable, they repurpose it. Sacred decor reinforces the tension. Above many hearths hangs a bed-blessing scroll, 2 clasped hands under a haloed Christ. Duty, yes, but also affection. Tom sometimes recites a smuggled vernacular verse from the Song of Songs, calling Maud my lily among thorns. Doctrine bows to poetry. Maud's smile outshines the hearth, when fortune's sour rules sharpen. A miscarriage may spark rumors the parents tempted fate on a fast day. A boastful husband might circle the nave barefoot candle in hand, while neighbors mutter prayers. Punishment doubles as theater binding private acts to public scripts. Laughter survives in harvest ballads. One praises a wife who counts saints' days backward. Another hails a squire who marries before Advent falls. Humor greases the gears between appetite and edict. Modern demographers see the dance in numbers births spike 9 months after Pentecost, dip after Advent. The calendar serves more as metronome than jailer. Even Father Osbert, in rare reflections, admits desire is God-given. The Church merely tunes it. Moral surveillance extends beyond bed sheets. Each spring, the Archdeacon's officers ride in for visitation. They quiz midwives, tally birth dates, and lift tapestries in search of illicit double beds. Neighbors sworn to truth trade grudges for gossip. A snubbed godparent reports squeaks on a vigil. A jealous suitor claims a rival used pagan charms. Clerks scratch notes on wax tablets, promising summonses after Easter. These inspections feel less like spiritual care and more like an audit of lust. Still, romances seep into peasant imagination. Jongleurs whistle refrains from Arthurian lays, where lovers defy convent bells and scraps of parchment bearing heart-shaped doodles circulate. The contrast sharpens the villager's awareness of constraint dreams gallop free, while bodies wait for green squares on the calendar. Even Father Osbert owns a dog-eared romance he claims is for moral study, though his flushed ears betray interest. Stories the Church condemns quietly teach listeners that passion need not heed bells. Winter wanes. Tom sharpens his sickle, humming a Candlemas hymn, whose playful words Maud alone understands. Tonight is free of interdictions. The children, exhausted from gathering kindling, will sleep soundly. The goat stays in the byre. A south wind hushes the latch. His heart lifts grateful that somewhere within bells, feast days, and tariffs a lawful corner of night remains. We leave them there, a tallow candle between piety and passion, a parchment wheel between decree and desire. Point 1 mapped the space of medieval intimacy. Point 2 has mapped its time an ever-turning liturgical clock couples read as keenly as the sky. In Point 3, we'll edge beyond the marriage bed to the lantern-lit brothels where sin wears a taxable face and civic order settles for compromise. Point 2 closed with Tom eyeing the lone lawful evening on the parish wheel. Point 3 follows him across the frozen drawbridge into St. Catherine's Gate, where the city fathers regulate desire as carefully as they weigh grain. Snow squeaks beneath his boots while he joins carters and pilgrims funneling toward the stews, that maze of timbered houses whose shutters glow the same deep red used on market scales. Wood smoke, spilled ale, and lamp oil braid in the night air. Lantern light dances across dangling icicles, promising warmth for a price. The authorities label this district the women's craft, yet the ledger files it under Public Works. Roger the bailiff cloak, trimmed in civic blue, stands beside a guttering lamp to collect the nightly entry penny too for foreigners. Half rate for townsmen, nothing at all for priests whose visits he records as pio causa pius reason, with a snort of laughter. A splintered board sets out the rules in mangled Latin and French: no visits during sermons, no drawn weapons, no woman beyond curfew. Inside the chief brothel, Mistress Agnes, no cousin to Maud, presides like a guildmaster. Ordinances force her to wear a striped hood that spares arrest inside the quarter, yet bars her from church doors, a reminder that absolution can be revoked as quickly as a license. She keeps immaculate books: which girl is in debt for shoes, which client still owes for wine, how many candles burned past midnight. Bath water is rationed, sheets boiled in lye each Sunday, and the house surgeon paid from the tax on sin opens a cedar chest of ointments beside the hearth. The women are migrants more than sinners. Cecily of Lincoln fled a violent stepfather. Margot of Rouen lost her dowry when a shipwreck claimed her fiancé. City records list them as servientes, yet they call themselves Sisters of the Sign, saluting the red glove nailed above the door. Each signs a parchment surrendering a third of her earnings for room food and the inevitable fines if caught plying trade outside the walls. Unlicensed competition threatens revenue, so constables patrol alleys with torches hunting for rogue lanterns like smugglers' fires. Night paints the quarter in silhouettes. A rebec sighs above a frame drum while pilgrims sip spiced hippocras. Tom cheeks flushed more from expectation than wine watches two Dominican friars duck behind a curtain. Rumor says the bishop himself collects rent on 2 of the houses. What stuns Tom is the tall woman descending the stairhair like ripe barley gown, laced tighter than Maud's Sunday bodice. Her ledger name will read Barley, though she whispers Selbine. Upstairs, Lavender struggles against the odor of rushes, and Tom notices the rope-thin wrists, the anxious glance toward the door whenever voices echo. She asks about his children. Married clients can be dangerous if they spend too freely. Sobering Tom departs early, pressing an extra halfpenny into her palm. Downstairs, Roger's chalk tick marks Tom's exit. Another copper clinks toward bridge repairs. Disease stalks every transaction. Municipal statutes require weekly inspections by the surgeon from the lepers' hospital. Suspect sores earn 3 weeks' exile to the Lazar house beyond the walls. Some girls fake illness with walnut dye to win arrest. Others smear mercury salve and pray the cure kills slower than the pox. Ledgers record spikes of sickness after crusading armies march through, followed by grim municipal outlays for burials, sums folded between wine tariffs and roof repairs. Council debate ricochets between scripture and silver. One alderman quotes Augustine calling brothels sewers that keep the palace clean. Another cites Jerome, warning that tolerance breeds damnation. Yet even the sternest moralist relies on vice to balance the budget. A proposal to move the stews outside the gates dies when merchants protest. Sailors flush with coin will not walk a mile beyond the walls after unloading crates of alum and silk. Commerce, not compassion, keeps the quarter glowing. The church offers compromise. Across the square stands a Magdalene chapel, whose bells peal at dawn, summoning the women for Mass. Attendance is theoretically compulsory. Confessions earn light penances, lest souls and revenue stray to outlaw dens. A Dominican preacher thunders about repentance, then shares wine with the bailiff, whose cousin owns half the beds upstairs. Religion, like desire, bends to the civic ledger. Amid contradictions, ambition simmers. Cecily buries foreign coins beneath a loose board, dreaming of a silk stall. Agnes negotiates with a tanner for sturdy boots. Blisters ruin business faster than sin. Even Roger keeps a pewter clasp shaped like a heart. Rumor claims it once belonged to a girl now buried by the river. Humanity persists inside the mathematics of vice. Curfew's second bell booms. Shutters slam, lanterns sputter, and the stews surrender to hush. Roger locks the gate and tallies the take enough to patch the bridge and mend the rutted street where Tom's cart will soon jolt. Trudging home, Tom feels the cold bite through his cloak. The same city that finds him for betting Maud on a vigil offers this valve a paradox as medieval as stained glass and chainmail. Outside the walls, the fiscal ripple widens. Tanners buy cast-off cloaks from Agnes to line soaking vats. Vintners unload sour wine to keep tongues loose, and the city mint restamps scuffed pennies that pass nightly between bed and bailiff. Even the hospital profits each licensed house must donate linen scraps for bandages, a civic loop tying pleasure to public health. Far from a moral sinkhole, the brothel quarter beats like a second heart, pumping copper and silver through the town's arteries, keeping craftsmen, clerics, and commoners alive in its steady, paradoxical rhythm. And so the city endures. Point 3 left us amid the licensed stews where city coffers fatten on flesh. Point 4 turns west along the same snow-dusted lane to the armor maker's arcade, where a different kind of protection gleams in torchlight. An iron girdle hinged, heart-shaped padlocked hangs from Master Ulrich's stall beneath a sign that crows, "Keep your wife true," for a penny a day. Tom slows boots crunching and joins the semicircle of gawkers. They know the jokes crusaders locking brides before sailing barons issuing keys on deathbeds. Still, the sight tugs curiosity the way a carnival mirror warps a face. Ulrich wields spectacle like any good smith. He taps the bands with his hammer to prove their hollowness, then flips the lock open, inviting the crowd to test the invincible clasp. A sly friar accepts slides 2 fingers past the plate and pops the bolt in seconds. Laughter erupts. Coins follow. Ulrich's girdle is less security device than street theater. Tonight's coin will buy charcoal and ale, and tomorrow he may melt the whole contraption into horseshoes. Yet the myth will stride on, armored in rumor. Even in 1300 folk sense, the tale's seams. Parish widows swapping bread at market recall no neighbor ever clanking under iron. Court rolls mention hedge trysts, lecher fines. Abandoned infants, never rusted locks. Illuminated manuscripts show belts only in the margins where monkeys play doctor and devils tickle nuns. Scholars, centuries later, will tally fewer than a dozen medieval belts, most cast in 16th or 19th century foundries for curiosity cabinets. But people love symbols. Iron looks authoritative, and a key hanging from a crusader's rosary makes a better fireside story than mundane household surveillance. Surveillance that is real. In most boroughs, a bride brings witnesses to prove the marriage consummated. Neighbors sleep a plank wall away. Confessors grill couples on dates and positions. Midwives track conception against the parish wheel Tom studied in Point 2. Community eyes, not iron rings, keep lineage intact. A girdle, if it existed, would actually hinder the finer controls of gossip and calendar. Yet the fiction persists because it flatters male anxiety, the idea that chastity can be engineered like a drawbridge and delegated to a single silent lock. Ulrich's audience understands this, even as they giggle. One carter observes that feeding a family during Lent is harder than guarding a wife year-round. Another wagers a week's wage he could file the belt off by moonrise. Their cynicism is practical. They know real restraint lies in law land and leverage. Dowry contracts stipulate forfeiture for adultery. Widows risk losing dower lands if suspicion soils their beds. Peasant girls accept or refuse suitors based on a single cow changing stalls. Marriage is less romance than merger, and everyone recognizes that metal cannot replace mutual need and constant scrutiny. Inside the guild hall, that dusk aldermen debating pewter weights pass Ulrich's belt along the table. A corpulent wool merchant shakes it, remarking that the city's brothel license is the truer chastity device, diverting excess desire for a fee and letting honest wives sleep. Unbothered. The chamber roars with knowing laughter. Ledger entries, not locks, maintain social equilibrium. Rumor, however, travels faster than ledgers. By Advent, the belt has grown a backstory. A Lombard count invented it. A Catalan queen still wears one. A Saracen jeweler forged an emerald key. Troubadours weave verses in which Cupid melts iron, with a kiss turning coercion into comedy. Chandler stalls sell belt oil plain goose grease to soften imaginary chafe. Apothecaries hawk key charms promised to unfasten hearts. Myth births an economy as lively as the stews Tom just left. Maud hears the talk at Candlemas while trading flax. She ties rush baskets, listening to two washerwomen wonder whether belts truly stop sin. Iron can't bar thoughts, Maud says, folding linen scented with wood smoke. Her comment spreads. A mendicant preacher repeats it next Sunday, twisting her insight into a homily on interior virtue. Thus, the myth becomes pulp for sermons, songs, and jokes, its substance negligible, its utility enormous. Why does it thrive? Because fear mates readily with imagination. Noble lines dread bastard heirs. Artisans fear a journeyman stealing both trade secrets and daughter's dowry. Even the church, which officially condemns bodily mutilation, delights in allegory. Monastic scribes praise Mary as the lock no devil picks, urging spouses to gird their souls with faith. A metaphor, yes, but metaphors stick, and parish tongues soon mistake symbol for steel. Generations hence, Victorians will inflate the myth to grotesque proportions. In 1846, a London antiquarian unveils a rust-flecked belt at the Royal Society, claiming it saved a 13th century countess's honor. Newspapers gasp. Suffragists cite it as proof of patriarchal cruelty. Museums scramble to acquire similar pieces, many freshly forged by wily continental smiths who learned their craft, perhaps from Ulrich's descendants. When metallurgists later test the rivets, they find modern alloys. The chastity belt becomes a relic twice forged, first in medieval rumor, then in industrial greed. But in Tom and Maud's day, the object remains sideshow sparkle. Real power lies elsewhere in broads that record fines for adulterium in guild oaths, that blacklist a man who impregnates a master's daughter in communal memory, that never forgets whose child resembles which pilgrim. The belt myth is comforting precisely because it outsources vigilance to metal. Life, alas, keeps that vigilance human. Night drapes the arcade. Ulrich douses his brazier, and snowflakes hiss on hot iron. He leaves the marriage keeper hanging, knowing frost will pit the surface, but not the legend. Tom trudges homeward belt story in his pocket like a pebble. Maud greets him at the hearth. They share cheese exchange news and chuckle over the gadget. Their trust, knitted from shared labor and whispered calendars, needs no key. Behind them, the city settles Stew's shutter aldermen, tote coffers, and parish clerks draft the next day's bans. Somewhere in a garret, a young scribe sketches a jester dangling a tiny iron girdle before a scandalized bishop. Satire not steel will chain hypocrisy tonight. Point 3 showed how vice could be taxed. Point 4 has unmasked the iron myth that claims women were literally padlocked. Next, in Point 5, we will step from imagined metal to pungent reality into the bathhouse and the riverbank laundry, where hygiene, or the lack of it, perfumes every encounter in our medieval journey. Point 4 unmasked the iron chastity belt as stage prop mythology. Point 5 turns from imaginary metal to very real odor, following Tom and Maud past the smithy's soot and into the steamy wood-planked precinct of personal hygiene. In winter's gray light, a sour mist rises where laundry kettles bubble and rush mats drip along the fence rails. Cleanliness in the Middle Ages is not a moral bolt. Like Ulrich's gimmick, it is a negotiation with climate class custom and an uneasy medical wisdom that warns excessive washing might soak the body's defenses away. On the Miller homestead, Saturday is the one agreed bath night, though the term flatters the reality. Tom hacks a hole through pond ice buckets, 3 pails, and swings them into Maud's hearth. A copper cauldron spits when cold meets embers. They thin the water with melted snow until it is merely lukewarm. Children scrub first youngest to eldest, each inheriting cloudier broth than the last. Parents follow crouching on a plank while Maud works lye soap through Tom's beard, and he rinses her hair with a wooden dipper. They towel off with coarse hemp before the water chills to the temperature of cider. The washtub's brown ring speaks of honest labor, but tomorrow's churchgoers will still detect the barn on their clothes. 15 miles away in the walled city Tom visited for Ulrich's spectacle, the public bathhouse sings a very different tune. Its signboard shows 2 naked figures drinking wine beside a cedar tub. The keeper, Master Werner, heats his vats all morning with split oak and whispers of juniper for fragrance. Merchants sweep in after vespers, paying a denier to soak in thyme-steeped water, another to borrow pumice, a third for the luxury of rosemary oil. A potboy reties screens when steam thins. Matronly attendants clatter brass pitchers at every squeak of the door. For an extra coin, Werner offers Hungarian water, a clear distillate of rosemary, rumored to cure melancholy, and more importantly, mask goat in the armpits. Gentlewomen sip Hippocras debate brocade patterns and sigh that the countryside must smell dreadful. Yet even here, hygiene tangles with morality. Bishops' edicts forbid mixed-gender bathing on feast days, while civic ordinances demand the pools be drained before dusk to curb nocturnal mischief. Werner grudgingly complies, but posts a note, bath closed at 6. Wine served till 7. The city father's no revenue steam keeps winter commerce ticking, and the bishop's own chantry choir occasionally appears in wet hair and borrowed slippers. Medical treatises weigh in with cautious optimism. The Salernitan regimen, copied on vellum in the cathedral library, advises bathing moderately to open pores, then sealing them with scented ointment, lest corrupt airs creep inside. Too much heat, warns the text, weakens the vital spirits. Too little invites plague. Apothecaries sell violet water to cool hot temperaments, and nard salve for chafed skin luxuries beyond Tom's purse. For peasants, clean linen against the flesh counts as half a bath. Thus Maud labors over the rinse barrel each new moon, scalding sheets with wood ash, so the family can sleep in what a chronicler calls the poor man's second skin. Smell in this world is social currency. A reeve's cloak reeks of horse sweat and rank cheese. A mayor's mantle of cloves and frankincense. A monk's habit of damp wool and candle grease. Nobody mistakes one for the other. Woodland herbs, such as sweet woodruff or meadowsweet, are bundled in bodices not for romance, but to soften the stable's punch. Even so, marketplaces vibrate with overlaying odors, tallow smoke, fish guts, ale yeast, and the personal halos of hundreds of unwashed bodies. To a medieval nose, neutrality means not actively rotting. Anything finer suggests privilege bordering on vanity. Soap itself stratifies society. Tom's Librick is harsh gray stuff rendered from mutton fat and ashes scouring grime, but leaving the skin scaly. In contrast, Bologna traders import white soap blended with olive oil for aristocrats. Its almond scent sniffs of the Mediterranean and of bills of exchange written in more comfortable money. City bylaws sometimes fine tavern owners who dump soap lather into street drains less for hygiene than for fear of angering tanners downstream whose hides might pucker. Dirt, therefore, is political, yet bathing can also reset reputations. A newly arrived widow once branded for public penance may rinse away the lime dashed on her hair and re-enter society wearing a veil scented with sage. A squire freshly knighted must soak, be scraped, and anointed before receiving spurs. Ceremonial cleanliness frames pivotal moments. Births, deaths, and coronations all involve warmed water and scented oils, even if the bucket traveled half a mile from a frozen stream to the church porch. Of course, there are skeptics. Some Franciscans preach that frequent bathing stokes lust-citing Bathsheba's rooftop allure. Peasant elders mutter that winter baths invite the egg by letting cold seize the bones as pores snap shut. In plague years, physicians chalk up contagion to opened humors and advise sealing the skin with vinegar rather than washing. Consequently, ordinary folk weigh each rinse against fortune is the itch on Tom's shin worth a half-felled tree of firewood and the chance of chills. More often than not, he simply brushes straw from his hose, trusts wool's lanolin to repel damp, and thanks St. Blaise that everyone else smells roughly the same. Still pockets of scented defiance root themselves in unlikely soil. In a riverside convent, nuns cultivate marigolds to perfume their infirmary baths. On May Day, youths in Tom's village roll barrels to the brook scrubbing till their cheeks glow, then race through the hamlet, flaunting May clean as if wearing crowns. Even Maud indulges in stealthy luxury once per season. She sprinkles lavender on the rushes, a modest rebellion that wins her curious compliments at market. Cleanliness may be relative, but aspiration is universal. And so, point 5 steams to its close, leaving our nostrils caught between wood ash and wild thyme. The chastity belt of point 4 proved a myth. The bath barrel of point 5 is undeniably real smoky tepid, and as revealing of hierarchy as any iron lock. As Tom douses the hearth and Maud hangs tomorrow's shirts to dry over meager embers, they share a final whiff of lavender that hints at gentler possibilities. In point 6, we'll slip from scent to remedy, opening Maud's wooden casket of herbs and charms to explore the risky, ingenious world of medieval contraception and the dangers that awaited any couple bold enough to outsmart both church and chance. Point 5. Closed on the lavender steam of a Saturday bath. Point 6. Slips from scent to remedy. Lifting the lid of Maud's cedarwood casket, a dowry box no bigger than a hen, yet more potent than any smith's lock. Inside, bundles of dried rue pennyroyal and tansy lie wrapped in linen strips beside a thumb-sized phial of red wine steeped with a beaver's testicle. These are no tokens of vanity. They are Maud's insurance policy against the arithmetic of hunger. A new child means another blanket, another mouth, another prayer that harvest sun is kind. But the church ledger that forbade mixed bathing also brands most stoppings of conception as mortal sin, so every leaf and powder in Maud's casket breathes secrecy. The midwife Adela taught her the basics one Michaelmas afternoon while men stacked hay. Adela, a square-fingered widow with eyes bright as copper coins, learned the craft from an Italian pilgrim who learned it from a Moorish weaver knowledge passed hand to palm like contraband. In a hedgerow behind the cottage, she crushed wild carrot seeds between slate stones, letting Maud sniff the peppery tang before consigning them to a pouch stitched from kid leather. "A pinch in ale each morning until the moon turns," Adela whispered, "and the cradle stays empty." Maud tasted grit, felt no magic spark, yet noted the midwife's caution. Miss one dose, and the charm unravels. Other recipes are harsher. Pennyroyal simmered in goat's milk curdles the stomach. Wort soaked in vinegar, then wrung through linen can scald tender skin. The most dreaded involves rue ash and a twig of juniper boiled down to black resin, powerful enough, Adela swears, to set the womb on fire if taken after quickening. Women resort to that only when a marriage contract is still fresh ink and a dowry cow not yet calved. Even so, risk hovers like an owl. Too strong a draught can summon St. Peter sooner than a midwife, and word of an unlawful purge draws the archdeacon's pen faster than gossip can flee. Men know pieces of the lore in crude outline, beaver stone steeped in wine to blunt lust, or a linen plug smeared with honey and mint, but laugh it off as old wives' alchemy. Tom himself once teased Maud about her sachets of fennel planting seeds to kill seeds. She smiled, remembering Adela's sharper quip. Men may wield the plow, but women choose which furrows bloom. Pragmatism, not ideology, guides her hand. She counts children against grain sacks, weighs a fetus against last year's frostbite scars on Tom's toes, and judges that another swaddled body might tilt the household from survival to beggary. Church courts thunder otherwise. In parchment sermons copied at St. Giles, Father Osbert lists herbal sorcery beside adultery and theft. A woman caught brewing pennyroyal for anything but cough syrup. Faces confession in full view, a week on bread and water, and public scourging if she refuses to name her supplier. Yet prosecutions are scarce. Proof wilts like mint in sun, and communities close ranks faster than clerks can sharpen quills. When a Reeves sister miscarried after rue tea, the village said she tripped on a threshing flail. Midwives kept silence, knowing the same rue might one day spare them a starving winter. The church wields doctrine. Women wield discretion. Effectiveness, of course, wavers. Modern scholars will chart wild carrot at 80% success in laboratory mice, but Maud has no such statistics. Only tails swapped over flax hackles. Meg's pennyroyal succeeded thrice, failed once. Gwen's linen sponge soaked in sheep tallow held firm if changed before compline. Maud herself once skipped a dose during Advent fasts, guilt disguised as piety, and felt monthly cramps right on schedule, a small mercy wrapped in pain. Yet every remedy courts counterfeit. Beavers become scarce along the river. Imported alum to tan linen spikes in price. King's inspectors tax foreign spices so heavily that city apothecaries stock only nettle seed, bitter and weak. Each shortage nudges couples back toward prayer or resignation. Still, the network adapts. A scribe's wife in town recopies excerpts of Trotula's Diseases of Women into pocket-sized leaflets, swapping them for butter or candle stubs. A traveling jongleur sings a rhyme, pennyroyal rue and thyme. Keep the babe until it's time embedding dosage cues within the meter, so shepherd girls memorize medicine as song. Even the bathhouse keeper Master Werner sells quince jelly touted to steady menses, its label printed in 3 languages to lure pilgrims. Commerce, like desire, dissolves censure in the clink of coin. There are tragedies. A girl named Leni drinks mugwort steeped in neat spirit collapses at matins and bleeds out before Adela can staunch her. The coroner blames flux of the womb scribes mark a tiny cross in the margin, and the priest buries her beyond the lich gate without bell or candle. Maud attends clutching her infant proof that not every potion works, and vows to guard knowledge with double caution. In grief's raw light, the casket's contents feel both talisman and trap. Yet within a month, another bride belly pale and tight knocks softly at Maud's door. Risk like hunger outweighs fear. Invisible threads of solidarity stitch the countryside. When Tom carts grain to market, Maud includes a bundle of tansy destined for a baker's niece. In return, she receives alum-dusted linen strips, rumored to bar conception 3 weeks strong. At Candlemas, a pilgrim woman leaves behind a pouch of silphium seeds, long thought extinct, wrapped in a scrap of Greek script. Neither Maud nor Adela can read the letters, yet the seeds feel light with possibility. Experiment is the hidden engine of peasant science hypotheses, brewed in kettles, conclusions whispered over cradles, or empty cradles as luck decides. That hidden engine grinds against the church mill. Father Osbert's next visitation brings a new edict any apothecary selling pennyroyal without a bishop's seal risks excommunication. While merchants grumble more red wax means higher bribes, women shift tactics. Carrot seed can masquerade as spice. Linen sponges look like any household rag. The law catches what it can name. The rest flows like water through wicker. Some men even collude a cooper whose wife nearly died. Birthing twins slips Adela a flask of brandy to dilute Rue's burn. Thus, necessity loosens patriarchal screws one thread at a time, though never loudly enough to wake the watchman. Spring returns. Tom and Maud sow barley in soil sweetened with midden. They debate another child only when the harvest sun has turned grain to gold. By then, hedgerow carrots have dried. Pennyroyal has bloomed twice, and the beaver pouch is nearly empty. They will weigh risk anew, informed by seed counts, by memories of Lene, by Father Osbert's thunder, and by the unspoken arithmetic of love. Somewhere in that calculus lies the next chapter of their family. Perhaps a newborn's cry, perhaps the quiet of a full larder, and 2 only children growing tall. Point 6 has traced the clandestine channels through which medieval women, and sometimes their partners, sought to bend biology to circumstance risking body and soul in the eyes of the church to keep hunger from the hearth. In Point 7, we will leave the herb garden and step into the village court, where those who defy consent or cross marital lines face public fines, pillory or worse, and where the concept of yes itself begins to flicker into medieval legal light. Point 6 ended with Maud weighing rue seeds against the risk of a hungry winter. Point 7 opens on a raw April morning, when even the stoutest remedies cannot untangle what happens after consent breaks or was never granted at all. The manor court has been summoned in the open field below St. Giles. A canvas awning flaps over a trestle table, hens scratch in the mud, and nearly every villager hovers at the rope line. For once, Tom and Maud set aside hoe and spindle to watch justice equal parts ritual and spectacle sort through the tangled vines of sex power and property. Sir Baldwin the Lord Steward calls each case from a parchment folded like a guilty secret. The first is almost routine. Alice and Watt, unmarried sweethearts barely 16, were found lying in suspicious fashion behind the malt barn. A neighbor's lantern exposed them. Now they stand red-eared, while the reeve recites the fine 6 pence each or 3 days, mucking ditches. Alice's father sighs with relief. Better a pocket emptied than a wedding rushed, or a belly swelling out of season. Everyone knows young love rarely checks the parish wheel, but the law demands payment, so the ledger, not the girl's body, absorbs the mistake. The second case tastes of iron. Marjorie the poulterer accuses Randolph the plowman of forcing her in a hayrick at dusk. She arrives veiled, escorted by 2 matrons, who lift her oath hand as she swears upon the relic of a saint's finger that no yes crossed her lips. Randolph, shackled, mutters that she tempted him with cider. The steward listens, then turns to the 12 jurors' men chosen for steady harvests and thicker purses to weigh truth. Under canon law, a woman's protest, if corroborated by injury or immediate outcry, can condemn a man to fines heavy enough to strip him of oxen or exile him from the manor. Yet in practice, bruises fade, witnesses grow skittish, and the question, did she fight hard enough, looms like a winter cloud. Maud's stomach tightens. She remembers Leanie, the girl who died after Mugwort's spirit. In Marjorie's trembling voice, Maud hears every woman's wager speak, and risk scorn, stay silent, and risk another assault. The jurors shuffle confer, and finally declare Randolph guilty of ravishment without murder. He must pay 40 shillings, an impossible sum, plus stand 1 market day in the pillory, wearing a sign, "I stole a woman's will." If he cannot pay, he will be driven from the manor with a shaved head, a symbol that any village may refuse him bread. It is harsher than some verdicts and softer than others. Justice here bends under the weight of barley quotas and kinship ties. Before the scribe sands the verdict, Sir Baldwin announces a different sort of trespass. Sybil, wife of the vintner, is charged with adultery. A traveling pardoner claims she entertained him too graciously while her husband tallied casks in the cellar. No witness saw the act, but the rumor itself frays social seams because grapes for the next vintage credit partly to the Lord. Adultery, unlike rape, often dissolves into economics, whose heir inherits which vineyard Sybil protests no veil chin high that the pardoner mistook courtesy for invitation. The court, lacking proof, fines her 2 shillings for overfamiliar speech and orders her to walk the church nave barefoot at Sunday Mass. The crowd hums with mixed pity and schadenfreude. Sybil's scarlet cloak will draw more stares than any barefoot penance. Then comes a charge, whispered for weeks. 2 journeymen tanners, caught in unnatural embrace behind the lime pits. Sodomy statutes imported from royal courts brand the act as crime against nature, yet enforcement wavers between moral dread and labor needs. Skilled tanners are rare. To lose 2 at once would slow roof tile production for the Lord's new granary. Sir Baldwin hems, clears his throat, and pronounces a lesser judgment: the men must fast 3 market days and fund 4 pounds of wax for St. Giles's altar. The compromise speaks volumes. Sin acknowledged workforce retained candles, burning to salve a communal conscience. Behind every verdict pulses the question of consent, fragile contested, but slowly surfacing in legal ink. Canonists like Gratian insist a marriage invalid without freely spoken vows. Secular jurists begin noting a woman's will as property she may guard against theft. These ideas filter down the way herbal lore seeps into Maud's cedar box piecemeal, reworded, sometimes distorted, yet unmistakably present. Even the pillory sign for Randolph echoes that shift theft of will not of chastity itself. The community may still prize fertility and lineage, but it is learning haltingly to name violation. Marjorie's case ripples through the village like rings on a mill pond. Young men lower their voices, mothers sharpen gossip into warning, and Maud notices Tom wrapping his arms around her more gently, as if mindful of unspoken rights. Still, resistance brews. In the alehouse, two carters grumble that girls cry wolf for a bigger dowry. A friar counters that courts must protect weaker vessels lest chaos reign. The debate ends only when the ale runs dry. Justice, like birth control, is a patchwork quilt stitched by hands of varying skill, subject to fraying, yet warmer than bare ground. Public shaming extends beyond fines. That night, a charivari pots clanged horns blown parades outside Sybil's window youths in masks mocking cuckold horns. The ritual serves as social glue and deterrent. It also reminds villagers that transgression never sleeps. Children peek from shutters. Maud hushes hers, unsure whether the din defends marriage or merely ventilates envy. Tom mutters that honor should be guarded in daylight, not howled at midnight, then tosses another log onto their hearth, clinging to the quieter law of mutual consent they negotiated years ago. By dawn, the field is empty, save wheel ruts and dropped rushes. Sir Baldwin's scribe will copy the proceedings onto vellum Randolph's fine Sybil's penance, the wax owed by the tanners, and send a duplicate to diocesan archives. Centuries later, historians will pore over those faded lines, marveling that medieval villages, so often caricatured as lawless, wrestled openly with bodily autonomy and the price of its breach. They will also note absences, Marjorie's healing. Alice's future children, whether Randolph found work in another shire. Records freeze judgment. Life thaws it in unpredictable directions. At home, Maud folds linen crib sheets, considering the lattice of law and secrecy that surrounds a woman's body. Her cedar casket guards seeds of prevention. The manor roll guards words of permission and refusal. Both are fragile, both essential. Tom enters, smelling of turned earth, and together they kneel for evening prayers, not out of fear, but habit weaving gratitude with worry. Tonight, their small world feels fractionally safer. A pillory board named a crime, a court admitted a woman's no, and somewhere a pair of candles flickers on St. Giles's altar, bought by two contrite tanners. Point 7 has traced how medieval communities translated desire's missteps into coins, candles, and public shame, inching toward a vocabulary of consent that will echo through later centuries. In Point 8, we will pivot from village justice to aristocratic notions of courtly love, where poets celebrate impossible romance, even as real marriages remain contracts, and where the heart's language sometimes subverts every statute we have just witnessed. Point 7 ended with candles glimmering over St. Giles's altar and a pillory sign that finally named the theft of a woman's will. Point 8 lifts us from village muck to the polished rushes of Lady Isabeau's great hall at Hygiene Keep, where parchment lute strings and perfumed gloves weave a different language of longing courtly love that flirts with every boundary. Tom and Maud just watch the manor court defend. It is late April, and the walled gardens burst with damask roses, while swallows stitch blue ribbons across the sky. Pages sprint along the gallery, bearing messages sealed in green wax Hygiene hosts. A Maying tourney, and poets arrive as eagerly as knights. Lady Isabeau, celebrated for her snow-white hawk and citrine yellow sleeves, presides from a canopied dais. Her marriage was sealed a decade ago in an exchange of land and wool levies, yet rumor whispers that her heart keeps its own estate. Into this perfumed bustle steps Guillaume de Foix, a Gascon troubadour whose repertoire circles Europe faster than plague carts. He bows so deeply, his feathered cap brushes the rushes, then unrolls a crimson scroll, verses praising, "Love the sovereign who crowns no kings, yet makes princes of pages." The words glitter with impossible devotion service, with no reward, save the lady's smile, chastity sworn even while desire blazes, and the courtiers sigh as if hearing scripture recited by angels. One squire cheeks flushed, copies a stanza onto his gauntlet in charcoal. Guillaume's audience knows the rules. Courtly love is play, wrapped in velvet seriousness, a ritual that inverts feudal hierarchy inside the safety of metaphor. A vassal may adore his lord's wife, provided the adoration remains a literary pose. The lady may grant a token, a sleeve ribbon, a glimpse from a window, but never her body. The more unattainable the union, the purer its rhetorical fire. In poems, the lady's refusal polishes the lover's virtue. In real life, such refusal could have landed Marjorie in Sir Baldwin's court. Courtly love imports desire into the castle, like a caged nightingale, admired for its song, prized for its restraint, never meant to fly free. Yet the fiction produces real tremors. During the tourney's first tilt, Sir Ranulph, eager to impress, lunges too far and splinters his lance against Lord Isabeau's cousin, drawing blood. Later in the arbor, he begs Lady Isabeau's favor, a silken token to heal honor. She retrieves a rose petal sachet from her girdle and ties it to his sleeve before half the court. Cheeks flush, fans flutter, and Guillaume's lute picks up a teasing refrain. Everyone understands the choreography, yet tension pricks like a burr beneath brocade. The sachet may hold only lavender, but lavender was Maud's bath night luxury, a scent that promised closeness. Cleaned of village sweat, it now perfumes longing, dressed as piety. Songs waft down to the buttery, where servants gossip. A scullion insists ladies who preach purity have secret trapdoors. A laundress counters that noble women bleed beneath silk like any milkmaid. The difference, they conclude, is consequence. A kitchen girl's indiscretion is a broken dowry. A countess's dalliance can ignite a border war. Thus, courtly love functions as a pressure valve, glorifying yearning while keeping bloodlines straight. If Tom's village court traded in shillings and shame, Hygiene's gallery trades in allegory and veiled looks, yet both aim to channel desire without destroying property or peace. Guillaume's next ballad, performed under moon-washed banners, sharpens that paradox. He sings of Tristan and his old lovers, sworn to chastity, bound by magic draught, whose pure devotion leads to exile and death. The refrain, "Better death than dull fidelity," sets hearts hammering. Sir Ranulph's glove tightens on his goblet. Lady Isabeau's gaze drifts to the arrow loops, as though imagining ocean horizons. Courtly love praises restraint, yet worships conflagration. It kisses virtue while dangling over the pit of scandal. Behind the arras, spidery scribes jot reactions. A chronicle entry will record the poet's name, the notable size, the way Lord de Winter's hand strayed toward his dagger when Isabeau's smile lingered too long on Guillaume. These notes will join hundreds across Christendom, feeding the new literary industry of chansonniers and romance cycles. When minstrels carry them south, they will gather embellishments. Perhaps Guillaume winked. Perhaps Isabeau wept. In that way, the fiction of perfect yet impossible love colonizes real hearts-shaping expectations, even in cottages far beyond the keep's shadow. Indeed. A month later, a tattered chapbook reaches Tom's village pages stained with lamp oil, but legible enough for the Reeve's daughter to recite beneath an apple tree. Maud hears lines about ladies who shine brighter than dawn, and wonders how such brightness fares when snow slips through roof thatch. She does not begrudge the fantasy life is scant on brightness, but she knows lavender sachets can cover sweat only so long. Courtly love and cedar caskets of contraceptive seeds represent different tactics against the same brute fact. Passion resists tidy bookkeeping. Courtly love also births its critics. Brother Petrus, a Cistercian visitor at Hygiene, preaches a dawn homily comparing troubadours to wolves in shepherd's clothing, seducing through rhythm what brigands take by force. He cites Randolph's pillory sign as proof that unbridled love already wreaks havoc among peasants. Why tempt knights to similar folly? The court hears him politely, then resumes its May-Day archery with double fervor. Hypocrisy? Perhaps, but Brother Petrus's scolding cements courtly love's allure sin wrapped in silk is sweeter than sin stinking of ale. Tension peaks at the closing feast. Guillaume dedicates his final lie to the lady whose glance commands armies. Lord Isabeau smiles thinly. Admiration mixes with alarm and invites Guillaume to dine at the high table. Jesters juggle pewter cups. Ranulph crushes his rose sachet. Over roast pheasant, Guillaume drapes a metaphor that edges perilously close to seduction. Your virtue is the tower I yearn to climb, though I die at its foot. Murmurs ripple. Lord Isabeau clears his throat. Guillaume backpedals with a laugh about dying to self through service. Everyone exhales, and a final toast drowns the danger. Courtly love, like Tom's pennyroyal, can save or kill, depending on dosage. When twilight spills across the courtyard, poets and knights depart. Lady Isabeau retires to her solar, perhaps rereading the Crimson Scroll, perhaps burning it. Ranulph rides away, sachet tucked in his breastplate, dreaming of impossible kisses. Guillaume pockets a purse of gold and the greater treasure of new rumors to stoke at the next castle hearth. And somewhere along a rutted lane, Tom and Maud tend lanterns their simple vows, steady amid the swirl of lyrics that never mention straw mattresses or goat breath. Thus, point 8 closes with love, elevated until it nearly floats free of bodies, yet tethered always by earthly consequences. Courtly love offers a script where desire can perform without dismantling property or lineage, just as village courts penned desire into fines and penances. In point 9, we will watch that script migrate from verse to sanctuary, exploring how monks and nuns, celibate by vow, wrestled with Eros in vision's pilgrim badges and the architecture of cloisters meant to guard souls from the very fire that troubadours exalt. Point 8 left desire, circling the rafters of Hygiene Keep in lute-struck metaphors. Point 9 follows that same restless spark eastward across sheep-nibbled downs until stone walls replace rose trellises and rules stiffen into vows. Dawn spills over St. Severin's Abbey, tarnishing waxy leaves with gold, while a lone bell tolls prime. Inside the cloister walk, Sister Beatrice counts beads, pacing beneath ribbed arches, meant to shepherd thought upward and anchor the body below. Courtly love praised yearning on a tight leash. Monastic love demands the leash be cut. The hound renamed Discipline, yet the scent of longing still drifts through incense. Visitors imagine abbeys as fortresses against flesh, but their ground plans rehearse a dance between temptation and containment. The central garth, trimmed like a checkerboard, lures eyes toward Eden, even while cloister walks urge retreat. Lancet windows slice sun into slender spears that spotlight manuscripts depicting Adam and Eve Magdalene's red hair, or St. Agnes clutching a lamb icons that mingle chastity with bodily memory. Architect masters. Gilbert and Alain, both former lay brothers, claim the narrow windows starve sight of worldly excess, yet monks confess that silhouettes of fruit hanging beyond the glass can summon ghosts of orchard picnics from their youth. Brother Matthew Sellerer, in charge of wine, knows this duel firsthand. Each vintage he tastes a dribble from every cask mouth, never quite swallowing. Striving to judge acidity, not pleasure, yet some evenings the nutty sweetness of an especially fine Rhenish shivers across his palate, and he must kneel in the dark sacristy until the thrill cools. He copies penitential psalms afterward. My bones wasted, as smoke adding tiny marginal vines whose curling tendrils look suspiciously like lovers' fingers. When the abbot inspects scrolls, he praises the vines as botanical fidelity, unaware or politely silent, that art has become Matthew's pressure valve. Pressure flows differently in the women's house 3 miles downstream. At St. Agnes Convent, Sister Beatrice sharpens quills, and her resolve yet nights bring dreams soaked in violet and myrrh. She once confessed to sensing Christ as my knight, pressing a wound-red kiss upon her heart. The confessor, more scholastic than mystic, assigned 3 days fasting on bread. The elders fret when nuns swoon during Passion Week homilies, though they cannot quite forbid tears. Male clerics codify doctrine, but female bodies translate it into heat pulse or milk letdown visions. Private liturgies that the cloister walls both conceal and amplify. Pilgrims unsuspectingly feed these inner fires. Each summer, traders unfurl blankets outside St. Severin's Gate, hawking pewter badges shaped like pierced hearts, miniature chalices, or improbably provocative ampulli said to hold drops of Mary's milk. Monks pretend disinterest, yet novices slip coins for tokens to send mother their cheeks pink. More lucrative still are wax ex votos, tiny torsos, limbs, even genitals cast for prayers of healing or fertility. When Sister Beatrice melts the offerings into altar candles, she reads the silent pleas embedded in each curve, learning theology one sorrow at a time. Commerce once harnessed vice in the stews. Here it barters longing for light. Not all houses keep their linen clean. Chronicle rumors speak of the Abbey of Farley, where a prioress hid a lover in the hayloft for 7 winters, or Fécamp, where a monk forged keys to the nuns' dormitory. Such scandals spark visitations, bishops arrive in scarlet capes, brandish papal bulls, and post new grillwork between men's and women's choirs. Yet enforcement seldom quells story. Minstrels weave ballads of the broomstick abbot or the nun in 9 months' silence, blending fact and smirk until every abbey inherits a whispered cousin of sin. Just as the village court's pillory teaches by dread, these tales instruct by ridicule warning that vows cracked by lust collapse like frost-split stone. Ironically, the very austerity of cloister life fertilizes art. Scriptorium benches echo with the scratch of goose quills, turning eros into allegory. Bernard of Clairvaux, describing the soul wounded by love. Hadewijk penning ecstatic letters, where union with God mimics bridal night tremors. When these pages reach castles like Hygiene, Lady Isabeau's female chaplain copies passages into her Book of Hours, delighted to find devotion phrased in the passionate key Guillaume once plucked on his lute. Thus, monastics export a refined, sanctified desire that court poets reimport as fashionable mysticism, a feedback loop binding cell to castle like 2 halves of a heartbeat. Yet for Tom and Maud, names that never garnish illuminated margins, the abbey's influence arrives distilled into pilgrim gossip. A relic cures barrenness. A nun's veil blesses harvest. A monk's sermon warns that pennyroyal brews anger St. Bridget. On Rogation Monday, Maud attends procession palm touching the reliquary of St. Linus and wonders whether the saint feels heat enough to understand rue seeds hidden in her apron. Brother Matthew, swinging the censer, glimpses her bowed head and briefly imagines orchards whine a different life. The chain of unspoken desires stretches from cloister to cottage, thin as spider silk, resilient as flax. When Vespers concludes, candles, gutter, and stone, cools faster than flesh monks and nuns surrender to nightly silence governed by the greater custody of the eyes. Desire barred from speech wanders cloister walks like a damp breeze, finding cracks between choir stalls and dormitory shutters. A novice prays for visions, a senior nun repaints a faded Christ wound. Ruby-bright Brother Matthew logs the cellar keys, but no lock iron or spiritual is proof against the restless human pulse we have followed from straw pallets to velvet sleeves. Courtly love, dramatized restraint. Monastic life ritualizes it, hoping constant discipline will transmute longing into holiness. Yet both environments prove that passion once named simply changes accent. Point 9 has traced how cloisters transform eros into incense, and ink exporting sanctified yearning, even as vows struggle to muzzle the heart. In Point 10, we will descend from stone sanctuaries back into the public bathhouses, leper hospitals, and surgeons' chambers, where disease, physical and moral grinds love's romantic gloss into raw flesh, and medieval medicine faces the pox that neither pennyroyal nor poetry can keep at bay. Point 9 concluded beneath cloister arches desire recast as holy fire. Point 10 follows that fire to the bathhouse, the Lazar house, and the surgeon's bench, where hot steam and cold fear mingle in the year the great pox first arrives. Dawn finds Werner, the bathkeeper, hammering a cedar plaque across his door, closed for purging. Yesterday, a pilgrim collapsed in the tepidarium pustules, blooming like copper coins around his collar. Now, rows of wooden tubs stand empty, stinking of lye and thyme. Master Ragnard, the city's barber surgeon, presides over the purge. His leather apron bristles with lancets, needles, and a horn syringe. He pours scalding water across floorboards, where sweat once pooled, then sprinkles ash of juniper and salt. Tom, hauling grain to market, pauses at the gate, remembering how lavender steam once felt like rebirth. Beside him, a fishmonger mutters that God is striking sinners who soaked with whores. Tom keeps silent, thinking of Maud's cedar box of contraceptive seeds. Inside St. Lazarus Hospital, Sister Elfrida ties a cloth soaked in rosemary vinegar around her face. Beds overflow sailors from Bristol, a scribe from Paris. 2 choir boys caught bathing their blisters in river water. Elfrida's ledger, grease-stained, hurried records each arrival under the stark heading Cutis Cor Rupta. She notes fever's ulcer shapes, remedies attempted. Quills scratch hope into data. Medieval epidemiology is born by candlelight. Ragnard visits nightly, comparing her notes to his own sketches. Vinegar fails, goose fat eases. Itching mercury ointment sometimes dries lesions, but leaves tongues swollen and minds deranged. He dissects a corpse in secret tracing, blackened nodes along the groin. When a Dominican friar bursts in, crying sacrilege, Ragnard snaps. Reason is God's lantern. The friar retreats unsettled, yet curious. Meanwhile, quarantine spreads like frost. Guards mark infected houses with red crosses. Bread is tossed through windows. Water carriers refuse those addresses. Chamber pots are emptied at night to dodge stones. Brothels shutter their tax pennies vanished. Bathhouse singers trudge to the fields. The pillory once for petty thieves now holds a poxy mariner, his placard reading, "I drank with strangers." Public shame becomes public health. Religion rallies. Brother Petrus, whose sermons once scourged courtly love, sells pewter badges of St. Roch patron against plague. Pilgrims pin them proudly, then cough blood within days. Faith bruises but endures. Sister Elfrida fastens a badge to her habit anyway, reasoning that hope is cheaper than mercury. Science limps onward. Ragnard confers with Jewish physician Elias ben Raham, who suggests distilled aqua vitae mixed with myrrh. Applied to ulcer rims, it burns cruelly, yet halts spread in 3 cases. They petition the Council for copper to build more alembics. Alderman balk citing cost. Werner pledges timber from his closed stews, confessing profit once rose on sin, so conscience must now pay interest. Rumor mutates faster than sores. Some blame poisoned linen from Lombardy, others the licentious blood of courtiers. Hygiene keep cancels its June revels. Guillaume's love lays gathered dust. Sir Ranulph murmurs that no rose is worth pustules. Courtly love retreats behind cedar chests, but the pox seeps through arras and mail alike. Knights returning from crusader ports bring saffron silk and sickness in equal measure. Maud hears tales at market fingers her purse of rue seeds. Adela the midwife prescribes a fumigation of pitch and henbane to clean the air. Tom hangs sprigs of rosemary above the door, saying that if angels follow scent, they will choose a sweeter house. Summer heat ripens the stench. Surgeons in the Guildhall debate causes under a ceiling painted with Galen's wheels. Astrology blames Saturn crossing Mars. Moralists blame women's baths. Ragnard brandishes Elfrida's ledger. Victims include monks' widows, virgins, gluttons, and fasters alike. Sin respects no calendar. A silence follows, broken by agreement to post watchmen at the quays. New rules emerge. Arriving ships must anchor 2 weeks downstream. Merchants may enter only after sweat bath and inspection. Soap makers must boil lye thrice. Bathhouses must change water for every bather. Werner posts prices triple the old fee to cover firewood and vinegar, declaring clean costs dearer than dirty. Customers grumble yet pay. Fear is stronger than thrift. Autumn winds cool the outbreak. Elfrida's bells ring less often. Ragnard's records show more scabbed survivors than fresh corpses. Still scars map cheeks like dried riverbeds, and gossip claims even saints flinch. The bathhouse reopens on All Saints' Day with pine resin in its vats, juniper bundles above each doorway, and a carved plaque, "Pure water, pure souls." Tom and Maud venture inside at dusk. Werner, newly humble, replaces water after each family. Steam rises silver in lantern light. Pine needles float like tiny crosses. Ragnard inspects Maud's arms, finding only soap rash. When they leave, Werner presses a sprig of juniper into Maud's palm. Half charm, half apology. The crisis seeds change. Aldermen fund a permanent Lazar ward. Guild surgeons earn city wage for nightly patrols. Sister Elfrida's ledger inspires an ordinance requiring householders to report eruptions within 1 day. Bathhouse habits shift separate tubs. Personal cloths, no singing after curfew. Public health is hammered together from fear-faith and a few fragments of empirical sense. Yet the pox also scars hearts. Adela recounts couples who now sleep edge to edge like strangers. Courtly lyrics lose their luster. Troubadours rhyme desire with caution. Even in cloisters, Brother Matthew inks vines tighter, as though binding passion with thorns. Desire survives, but it shivers. Point 10 closes with bodies scrubbed raw spirits, tempered by a malady that mocks every social partition peasant poet or penitent. Disease like love proves impossibly democratic, yet it spurs unexpected coalitions, surgeon beside monk bathkeeper, beside alderman midwife, beside Jew. Their teachings will show why inner armor sometimes outshines steel or soaped-out debt, and midnight wolf howls. In point 11, we will step away from boils and bandages toward quieter battlements of the mind, tracing how Stoic philosophers from shipwrecked Zeno to Emperor Marcus offered a discipline of thought to outlast both plague and passion. Point 10 left Tom and Maud stepping from Werner's pine-scented bathhouse into a city forever changed by the great pox. Point 11 crosses both centuries and provinces of the mind to ask how people survive when soap seed or scalpel fall short. The answer: many discovered scribes and abbey scriptoria surgeons hunched over ledgers, even weary peasants counting coin at dusk, was an older kind of medicine. Stoicism, a philosophy hammered on Mediterranean quays long before Gothic arches pierced the sky, yet suddenly vivid again in illness's ash-gray dawn. The story begins with a shipwreck. Around 300 BCE, a Phoenician merchant named Zeno of Citium lost every ingot and amphora on the seabed off Piraeus. Wet penniless, he wandered into an Athenian bookstall, opened a scroll of Xenophon, and felt something kindle. The shopkeeper pointed him to the Cynic crates. Zeno followed, sleeping on woven mats, mending cloaks with his own thread. Years later, under the painted colonnade called the Stoa Poikila, he forged a creed: virtue is the only good vice, the only evil, and everything else wealth, health. Even reputation, mere indifference to be handled with calm. Shipwreck in Stoic telling is not catastrophe. It is the forge that tempers metal. Cleanthes succeeded him, a former boxer, whose fists now copied philosophy at night while hauling water by day. If Zeno supplied the steel, Cleanthes provided the tendon discipline through labor gratitude, for breath reverence for logos, the rational fire he believed threaded every star and soul. Then came Chrysippus, the logician, who stitched doctrine tight enough to survive translation from Attic Greek to dusty Latin classrooms. Fast forward 2 centuries, Seneca the Younger tutors Nero and writes letters exalting tranquility while Rome seethes. He calls anger a form of temporary madness, grief, a blade that dulls with mindful sharpening. Exiled, reprieved, then ordered to open his own veins, Seneca answers the empire's cruelty with composure that unnerves even his enemies. Epictetus follows, once a slave, whose master shattered his leg. He limps to freedom, preaching that chains grip only the body. Opinion alone enslaves the self. And atop the pyramid sits Marcus Aurelius, emperor soldier, scratching reflections beside Danube campfires. The impediment to action advances action, while snow clots his legionaries' beards. When plague later blackens medieval streets, copies of Marcus's meditations whisper from cathedral libraries. Brother Petrus, the fire-tongued preacher, who once blamed troubadours for moral decay, discovers a tattered Latin digest labeled Florilegium Stoicorum. Sleepless after burying 30 pox victims in 1 week, he reads, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." The words shock him, neither miracle nor relic, yet oddly consoling. He boils them down to a sermon on inner citadels that no contagion can breach. Parishioners drained by funerals listen, as though hearing water strike a gong. Stoicism trickles outward along trade routes. Surgical guilds cite it when cauterizing sores. Pain is an impression. Courage, a choice. Midwife Adela repeats Epictetus to calm a trembling mother. What frightens you? Contraction or the story you tell about it? Knights memorize Seneca before tourneys, discovering that fatalism can double as bravado. Even Werner the bathkeeper nails new maxims beside his price list: suffering, events, expectations. Some grumble that he charges philosophy by the bucket. Others pay gladly. Believing hot water and hard truths both cleanse, yet Stoicism must bend to Christian doctrine or burn in suspicion. Monastic compilers cleverly reframe it. Patience replaces apatheia, grace. A noble's rational logos. Resignation to providence supersedes fate by physics. Margaret of Oingt, a Carthusian prioress, paraphrases Marcus into French prose so novices may steel themselves against lustful daydreams. She keeps the Latin original locked in her writing desk, perhaps sensing that pagan echoes still pulse beneath the pious varnish. Meanwhile, Tom and Maud encounter Stoicism in humbler garb. A traveling friar trades them a booklet titled Solace for Suffering Times, 9 leaves, nailed together with twine. Inside plowshare metaphors mingle with Epictetus's counsel, cropland accepts drought, the way the soul must accept loss by plowing deeper. Tom reads by hearthglow nodding whenever philosophy rhymes with the stooped dignity of winter plowing. Maud traces a passage stick to what is in your control, and thinks of rue seed's pox scars, and how even the great bathhouse purge lay outside her sway. She copies the line onto scrap linen and sews it into the waist hem of her shift, an amulet less fragrant than lavender, but more durable. The city too stitches Stoicism into civic fabric. After the worst plague wave, Fade's aldermen institute a day of silent reckoning. No markets, no sermons, only bell chimes marking the hours, inviting citizens to examine whether fear or reason guides their choices. Some scoff at the gimmick until they experience the hush, a whole populace breathing in sink carts, halted quarrels postponed. In the stillness, they sense what Marcus meant by a mind free from hasty judgment is citadel enough. Commerce resumes next dawn, but tempers cool faster during disputes, and pox rumors spark fewer riots. Stoic pause becomes public policy. Not all embrace it. A Miller's Guild pamphlet mocks Stoics as stone-faced navel-gazers useless when grindstones crack. A mystic nun warns that excessive self-sufficiency smacks of pride. Yet the ideas persist because they feel strangely democratic virtue needs no dowry, composure, costs no coin. When woodcut printers arrive in the 15th century, Epictetus's Little Enchiridion becomes one of the earliest pocket volumes small enough to tuck inside a tradesman's jerkin. Gutenberg's ink births a second Stoic revolution. Jump again this time to a London coffeehouse 1675. Merchants sip bitter brew, while gentlefolk debate whether reason alone can tame passion. They quote Seneca between puffs of New World tobacco. Across the channel, René Descartes references Stoic calm while dissecting human emotion. Spinoza calls joy the mind's increase of perfection, echoing Cleanthes' cosmic gratitude. The philosophy mutates, but its spine holds. Guard judgment, accept fate, cultivate virtue, and in the modern era, our era Stoicism slips into psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy lifts its core insight thoughts, spawn feelings so bend thought and feelings will follow. A Silicon Valley app pings daily, prompts cribbed from Marcus. A soldier in a desert reads meditations before patrol. A nurse on a COVID ward tattoos Amor Fati on her forearm. Tom and Maud are dust, yet their heirs still navigate uncertainty with the same inner armor Zeno first hammered from loss. Point 11 closes on that realization. A philosophy born of shipwreck became the life raft for plague survivors, crusader widows, abbots, bath keepers, and everyone who ever stood powerless before. Forces disease, desire, destiny beyond any herb or edict. In point 12, we will sail back into the lay world, tracing how public rituals of marriage feast and festival reknit communities after loss, transforming Stoic embers into collective celebration that reminds both town and abbey why life, though fragile, remains worth the risk of song. Point 11 ended with Stoic embers glowing quietly in parish hearts. Point 12 fans those coals into public flame, following Tom and Maud, as well as monks, merchants, and minstrels into the bright whirl of post-plague celebration. Philosophy steadies the individual, but communities heal through ritual. And in a world that has stared down death, every ribbon drumbeat and marriage vow takes on the urgency of spring after a killing frost. The first signal comes on a crisp November twilight, when the aldermen post a proclamation the city will revive the Feast of St. Martin, long deferred during quarantine, complete with lantern parade, communal roast, and most daring of all, an open-air dance on the Old Market Square. Werner the bathkeeper volunteers hot wine. Sister Elfrida offers honey cakes in moderation. Even stern brother Petrus approves quoting Seneca Fortitude, includes joyous action when the hour allows. Stoic steel, in other words, now frames jubilee rather than dampening it. Preparations transform the streets. Carpenters erect a timber dais beneath festoons of evergreen. Glaziers hang colored horn panels to catch torchlight. The cooper's apprentices carve antler masks for the mummers. Adela the midwife, armed with rue and rosemary, sprinkles doorsteps, declaring that merriment should smell as safe as it feels. Tom sharpens his scythe not for harvest, but to trim reeds that will become floor matting so dancers' boots won't churn mud. Maud stays up by candlelight, hemming a new kirtle from indigo-dyed wool, a bold color that says, "Life has more to offer than gray pennants." When Martinmas Eve arrives, bells pour bronze music over frosted rooftops. Citizens emerge like shoots from thawed earth, each bearing a lantern clay horn or simple rushlight in a turnip shell. The procession blooms through narrow lanes, casting constellations on plaster walls. At its head walks the Reeves' young daughter Flora, crowned with woven barley, and carrying the relic arm bone of St. Martin in a crystal tube. Months ago, villagers eyed one another with suspicion. Tonight, they march shoulder-to-shoulder, candles trembling in the same late autumn wind. On the square, a whole ox turns on an iron spit, its drippings caught in trenchers of stale bread. Musicians strike up Rebecca and Tabor. The first reel belongs to children, whose squeals scatter wood smoke. Then come the youths, testing new stoic composure against old instincts, laughter bubbles louder than philosophy. At last, the married folk pair off. Tom bows rustically, but with attorney knight's solemnity, and leads Maud into the throng. They step left, right spin. Her indigo skirt flares like spilled ink. Each whirl erases another haunting image of plague sores and shuttered windows. Nearby, Werner ladles mulled wine, reciting Marcus Aurelius, "Accept wine's warmth, as you would accept winter's cold," before shouting, "Next," with a grin. Sister Elfrida moves among revelers, checking flushes for fever out of habit. Yet the only contagion tonight is happiness. Even Brother Petrus claps on the offbeat. Across the square, a pair of Jewish merchants share dried figs, reminding everyone that commerce suspended by fear has veins ready for blood again. Midway through the evening, a hush ripples outward as Lord Isabeau's herald steps onto the dais. Hygiene Keep, he announces, will sponsor a double wedding at Candlemas Sir Ranulph to the Reeves' widowed niece and Lady Isabeau's own ward. Young Aliénor to Guillaume, the troubadour proof that poetry can pay dowry after all. The marriages, he adds, will be blessed under the new civic charter that waives half the usual fees for couples whose families lost members to the pox. Applause breaks like surf legal mercy has answered mortal loss. Stoic acceptance meets institutional compassion. Maud catches Tom's eye. They both remember the manor court, where consent was argued amid mud and shame. Tonight, consent rings with music, witnessed by hundreds sealed in roasted meat and lantern wax. Stoicism taught them to govern inner storms, but festivals like this re-stitch frayed social cloth, making private virtue visible. The winter weeks leading to Candlemas become a tapestry of shared tasks. Tom helps Sir Ranulph's retainers fell spruce for a ceremonial arch. Maud and Adela teach Aliénor and other maidens a blessing song, whose refrain, "Hold fast to what is in your power," lifts Epictetus into bridal lore. Werner reopens a refurbished tepidarium for pre-wedding purification baths, this time enforcing single-use water and individual soap cakes. Instead of resenting the new rules, patrons praise them. Hygiene has become communal honor. Candlemas dawn glitters with hoarfrost. Snow creaks under wagon wheels, carrying gifts bolts of Flemish linen, a crate of Orvieto wine, a cask of pickled herring representing resiliency through lean times. The Abbey Choir meets village minstrels on church steps, their mingled voices threading plain song with country harmony. Inside candles by the hundred flare against whitewashed walls, each flame a miniature echo of Stoic logos incarnated in wax. During the vows, Father Osbert reads from Paul, but his homily dips into unexpected waters. He quotes Seneca's line that true happiness is an agreement of actions with circumstances. No one gasps. Philosophical borrowings have shed their pagan odor. As rings pass from gloved pages to trembling hands, the congregation bursts into Gaudeamus Igitur. A student song, newly popular along university roads, its chorus, insisting that, while we may die tomorrow tonight, we rejoice. The feast that follows sprawls through nave cloister garth, and even the refectory garden under awnings. Peasant stews simmer beside lordly peacocks. Stooped nuns trade riddles with squires. Games of chance raise coins for the Lazar Fund, demonstrating that generosity and gambling can share a table in newly flexible morality. Guillaume sings a fresh composition, half courtly love, half village reel, christening a hybrid genre bardic circles will call carol philosophique. As dusk settles, celebrants light slender tapers and form concentric rings, each ring turning opposite its neighbor, a living orrery of humanity circling common flame. At the center stand Tom and Maud Ranulph, and his bride, Guillaume, and Eleanor Werner, with a wine-ladle sister Elfreda, with bandages tucked unnoticed in her sleeve, and brother Petrus holding a Stoic florilegium beside his breviary. They raise voices in a round that praises Saint Seasons and surviving one more winter. Stoicism's ember now shared glows in every lantern swinging home that night. People have learned to honor grief without chaining themselves to it. Learned that resilience is not a solitary virtue, but a chorus requiring many parts. Aldermen draft bylaws making Martinmas and Candlemas permanent city feasts for salute of body and soul. Markets anticipate surges. Musicians apprentice. Tanners begin embossing Marcus's aphorisms onto belt tongues, proof that philosophy can be lucrative as well as soothing. Point 12 closes with the square emptying torches, hissing out on snow, and Tom lifting Maud onto their cart. The road home is rutted, but silvered by moonlight. In the hush, they hear distant laughter, a melody of recovery. They do not speak of pox scars, Stoic treatises, or guild ordinances. They simply squeeze hands, knowing that celebration like rue seeds is another form of prudent medicine. In point 13, we will peer beyond their lantern into the broader horizon, where new trade winds and new wars reshape medieval love and labor testing, whether the lessons of plague philosophy and festival can travel as reliably as silk and salt. Point 12 faded out with wedding lanterns bobbing along frost-bright lanes. Point 13 shifts our gaze beyond village hedgerows to the trade routes and borderlands where silk salt and soldiers churn the late medieval world. Festivals may mend spirits at home, yet a single caravan or troop levy can tug those spirits into currents far larger than any Martinmas reel. The question now is whether the hard-won lessons of plague stoicism and shared celebration can travel as surely as spice sacks and longbows. Spring opens with news that the Genoese galleys have re-entered the channel, lured by wool and silver. Their lateen sails, white triangles against pewter skies, fill Tom with both thrill and dread thrill, because merchants pay handsome coin for barley bread and tallow. Dread because every ship carries rumors of fresh war between France and England. Maud watches him tally. Grain sacks remembering how disease arrived on foreign decks. She stitches a pouch of lavender and rue for his belt. Not as contraception this time, but as talisman trusting the scent of home to guide him back. The road south soon resembles a braided rope of pilgrims' drovers and pack horses. At the thriving port of Southampton, Tom's cart queues behind Moorish traders hawking saffron and a Hanseatic clerk seeking English tin. Stoic composure, he discovers, is tested differently here, not by plague sores or court fines, but by tariffs that shift with every rumor of siege. Tom repeats Epictetus. Some things are within our control, while negotiating dock fees that clearly are not. Dockside taverns pulse with melting pot chatter. A Norman archer boasts of new contracts in Aquitaine. An Irish wool factor laments piracy off Waterford. A Florentine agent slips letters sealed with a dolphin crest into every willing hand. Those letters penned in polished Tuscan introduce the concept of credito goods now payment, later enforced by nothing more tangible than reputation. Stoic detachment meets its mercantile cousin risk, calculated, entered into ledgers, and carried across seas like invisible ballast. Among the arrivals is Guillaume the Troubadour, now married to Aliénor, yet still chasing patronage. He sings on warehouse wharves, his courtly refrains tempered by riffs on merchant daring. One popular verse compares the Silk Road to a love affair. Desire begins in far Kashgar, is tested in Samarkand, and consummated where crimson cloth kisses English snow. Sailors roar approval. Desire, it seems, adapts as nimbly as trade routes, but the world's widening also tightens certain screws. The English crown, hungry for coin, imposes a wool tax that ripples all the way back to Tom's shire. Traders respond by demanding heavier bales for the same price. Stoic maxims help Tom swallow frustration, yet he must now work double rows to match last year's income, proof that philosophy, while sturdy, is no hedge against geopolitics. Maud, balancing household scrolls, remembers Seneca's warning that fortune is a wheel without a handle. She replies by planting a second plot of flax, converting adversity into thread. War rumors solidify into levies. Sir Ranulph, freshly wed, receives a royal summons muster at Calais by midsummer. Hygiene keep buzzes with armorers, hammering brigandines, scribes drafting indenture lists, and weavers stitching banner emblems. Lady Isabeau's yellow sleeves now transformed into the livery of a company. The marriage that symbolized post-plague renewal becomes collateral in a larger contest for continental crown claims. Departure day at Hygiene is a pageant of mixed intent. Priests chant litanies. Smiths clatter weapons onto carts. Guillaume performs a new dirge ballad, promising that steel must travel so peace may stay. Stoic echoes surface soldiers clasp hands, vowing to govern fear. Wives recite Marcus's line about meeting what fate assigns. Yet tears are honest hope, fragile. Aliénor presses a brooch, a tiny silver wheel, into Ranulph's palm, invoking not fortune's blind spin, but the wagon of safe return. Back in the village, Werner's bathhouse now hosts gatherings of wives tracing campaign routes on charcoal boards. Sister Elfrida offers first aid lessons learned during the pox, how to clean arrow wounds with wine, how to stitch flesh without trapping heat. War becomes another contagion, anticipated with the same pragmatic blend of fearcraft and communal pooling of knowledge. Trade adjusts once more. With nights abroad, pack horse strings need escorts. Tom's steady heft earns him a contract to drive grain toward London, where bread prices spike during sieges. Stoic discipline again shifts from mental armor to logistical edge. Tom times rest stops by Seneca's measure. What is yours to rule? Horses' axle grease, never the weather. On a muddy turn, he meets Elias ben Raham, the Jewish physician who helped fight the pox. Elias now stocks apothecary chests for field surgeons, believing that if war must travel, so too should healing. Their handshake seals a micro-alliance beyond creed or crown. In London, Tom witnesses commerce's new theatrics. The Royal Exchange buzzes with coded chalk symbols, wool futures, grain estimates, insurance pools for fleets. Greek letters and Arabic numerals share the same wooden slates, proof that cross-cultural algebra can outpace patriotism. Over ale, a Lombard banker explains double-entry bookkeeping. A mental stoicism for money, every gain mirrored by a liability, every liability steadied by gain. Tom, illiterate in Italian, but fluent in common sense, grasps the concept's echo of balance. He once learned hoeing ridges in alternating directions. Meanwhile, in Calais, Sir Ranulph writes cramped letters to Alienor on scraps of parchment reused from dried cod invoices. He describes arrow clouds, mud that sucks hooves like leeches, and the eerie calm between trumpet blasts. Yet he also notes moments of shared humanity, an impromptu market where English archers barter bootlaces for French onions, a truce hour mass where opposing priests kneel side by side. He closes each letter with stoic brevity. Outcome unknown, virtue intact. Letters travel home via the same Genoese galleys that ferry spice and rumor. Every arrival draws crowds at the quay. Maud reads aloud for neighbors whose sons march with Ranulph, her voice blending literate fluency with peasant empathy. Each reading is both solace and civic lesson. The world is wider, but also stitched with familiar threads: love vows, risk calculations, and the mind's obligation to remain unbroken. Winter returns. War's front lines freeze into stalemate. Trade caravans detour around bandit-heavy passes. Plague whispers yet again from the Baltic. Still, the city council repeats the Feast of St. Martin this time, adding a pledge of safe passage. Ceremony travelers step onto the dais, recite a compact of mutual aid, and receive wax-sealed tokens shaped like interlocked rings. Werner donates baths. Elias offers tinctures. Guillaume leads a chorus whose refrain blends Epictetus and folk proverb roads bend hearts steer. One night after the lantern parade, Tom uncovers a small chest beneath the grain sacks, a gift from the Lombard banker blank ledger's ink, and a primer in trade arithmetic. The banker's note says, "For the farmer who understands seasons inside the mind." Tom shows Maud, and together they trace columns, marveling that numbers could float across borders like swallows, yet nest safely in their hands. Point 13 closes with that humble chest. Neither dowry casket nor reliquary, but evidence that ideas like goods are portable, mutable, and as valuable as wool or wine. The lessons of plague and philosophy have indeed hitched rides on caravans and war wagons, proving resilient amid tariffs and trumpet calls. In point 14, we will turn homeward once more, drawing all threads tight as Tom and Maud weigh what legacy they will hand to their children, how to balance ledger and conscience, rue seed and wedding ribbon, stoic calm and Martinmas joy in a world that never stops spinning. Point 13. Closed on a Lombard ledger chest tucked beneath Tom's grain sacks, a gift that promised to turn hard-won field wisdom into numbers that could sail the world. Point 14 brings us back to the Miller cottage in late February, where frost feathers the shutter gaps and the evening fire snaps like brittle parchment. The children, now lanky with adolescent spoon, turnip stew, while Tom unlocks the chest for the first full lesson. The candle's glow gilds the neat Italian columns, debito to the left, credito to the right, two hands of the same body, as balanced as a stoic mind. Maud watches from the settle spindle whirring. Outside, the wind rattles elm branches, but inside an unlikely academy forms. Father instructs son and daughter together, chalking barley yields beside carriage fees, showing how every promise of coin must greet its mirrored cost. Stoicism breathes through the arithmetic. Tom repeats the banker's maxim gain, without ledger is rumor, and the children nod, remembering plague whispers and war rumors that once traveled faster than truth. In that small room, education becomes an heirloom more durable than silver spoons. Yet numbers alone cannot keep wolves or royal taxmen at bay. Maud therefore opens her cedar casket and adds a new compartment for legal parchments, war contracts, grain tariffs, even an embossed safe passage token from the city's Feast of St. Martin. The casket, once only a womb of herbs and secrecy, now holds ink and law beside rue seeds, a living index to the couple's evolving strategy of survival. Daughter Ellen learns to sort the rolled scrolls by seal color. Son Jorund grinds dried lavender to keep the documents smelling of home proof that practicality and tenderness can share a box without quarrel. News arrives with the thaw. Sir Ranulph's company returns limping but undefeated. The reeve calls an assembly in the tithe barn lanterns, bobbing like fireflies among hanging hams. Ranulph speaks of arrow storms of French vignerons who shielded vines while knights clashed nearby, and of a certain Jewish physician, Elias ben Raham, whose field salves saved more men than surgeons' knives. He gifts Tom a jug of Gascon wine in thanks for grain delivered to the front line, and proposes a barn school where veterans teach shield work and merchants teach ledger lines. War has shown that courage and column balance march best in file. The aldermen approve. Soon, the disused granary loft echoes with mixed recitations, boys practicing bow draw beside girls chanting multiplication tables. Werner donates bath vouchers as prizes for neat ledgers. Sister Elfreda demonstrates emergency stitches on pigskin. Guillaume, passing through with fresh ballads, sets the multiplication tables to melody-making trade arithmetic as catchy as a maypole song. Thus, a curriculum sprouts that no cloister or guild could have designed, alone a hybrid of stoic restraint merchant precision and minstrel wit. At home, Maud prepares Ellen for her first market apprenticeship. Together they pack the cedar casket's herb drawer, gentle pennyroyal not for contraception now, but for calming trade nerves, dill for bartering breath, clove for warding tavern stench. A lady's purse needs fragrance and fact. Maud says, slipping in a scrap of parchment bearing Epictetus's line, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you must." Ellen tucks it next to her modest dowry list. Hope and caution folded together like prayer hands. Meanwhile, Jorund apprentices to Ranulph's steward, learning to tally soldier wages and horse fodder. He copies Marcus Aurelius into Margin's waist. No more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. On errands, he carries a sling bag sewn from harvest year linen, its seams reinforced with silken salvage, rejected by Isabeau's seamstress. Luxury threads repurposed into practicality mirror the entire community's philosophy, adapt, splice, and waste nothing. Especially not lessons hammered out in plague and war. Lammas. The Wheat Blessing Festival arrives under golden skies. The village green brims with sheaves and new banners, bearing intertwined rings and abacuses a crest for the barn school. Father Osbert, once wary of herbal sorcery, blesses the loaves, then blesses the ledger chest, declaring that honesty in trade is equal piety. Even Brother Petrus admits in a quiet aside that the balance sheet-like confession requires full accounting. Werner ladles mild ale. Guillaume debuts a round, where every refrain answers with a mental principle, count the grain guard as the heart virtue and measure are never apart. Tom and Maud dance last, older joints creaking but faces bright. They know their children will grow in a world still rife with levy lust and pestilence, but also newly threaded by shared knowledge that moves faster than ships. As twilight deepens, they hand Ellen a small iron key, the first Maud has ever forged in secret collaboration with Ulrich the smith. It does not fit a chastity belt, those old myths have long since rusted. It fits the cedar casket, now rechristened the family coffer of mind and means. What began as a clandestine herb box and evolved into a legal archive now becomes a portable vault of wisdom. On the cart ride home, Jorund asks why Stoic sayings sit beside penny royal and tax scrolls. Tom answers by steering the cart through a rutted patch without spilling the llama's bread. A wheel needs many spokes. Pick one and the cart falls. Maud adds, and each spoke must flex or it snaps. The children fall silent. Feeling road bumps translate directly into metaphor. Back at the cottage, the ox's breath clouds in the stall while the hearth rekindles. Tom enters his new figures in the Lombard ledger debts. Paid credits earned a modest surplus for winter cloth. Maud files Ranulph's school charter behind herb bundles. Ellen locks the coffer with the fresh key and hangs it on a wooden peg by the hearth where everyone can reach it. Stoicism has found its home not just in hearts, but in lumber iron parchment, and scent tangible, teachable, and ready to be lifted onto any wagon bound for uncertain roads. Point 14 ends on that image, a humble cottage whose walls now shelter more than straw mattresses and goat breath walls that ring with multilingual tables, legal parchments, distilled remedies, and songs that map trade winds. In Point 15, the final chapter, we will widen the lens one last time, watching Tom and Maud's legacy ripple down decades, measuring whether a village that learned to navigate plague war and economics can also chart the uncharted sea of posterity, where future generations will decide how many of these carefully fashioned spokes remain in the wheel. Point 14 ended with Ellen locking the family coffer beside the hearth. Point 15 crosses 30 winters to show what became of that cedar vault and the ideas curled inside. The cottage roof is newly thatched, Tom's beard is snowy, and Maud's spindle now whirs in their granddaughter Anselma's quick hands, but the rhythm of ledger herb and hearth endures, and from it a wider story has spun. The barn school that sprouted in the old granary has grown into a stone hall stamped with Ranulph's crest, 2 interlocked rings above an abacus. Veterans still drill shield technique on the green, yet most pupils now arrive clutching quills. Jorund, once Ranulph's clerk, directs classes in reckoning by double entry, a skill that has lured Flemish cloth factors to sponsor scholarships for bright village girls. Ellen, meanwhile, manages a bustling dye house on the river, her ledgers stitched with Stoic aphorisms in the margins. She exports indigo cloth as far as Bruges, and every bolt carries a lavender and rue sachet, a fragrant shorthand for the balance of caution and hope her mother taught. When plague flares again, townspeople do not scatter. They open the coffer's medical compartment, reread Sister Elfreda's notes, and apply Elias ben Raham's copper distillate to door lintels. Werner's bathhouse, expanded with separate hot and cold wings, becomes a triage hub where apprentices chart symptoms on wax tablets for the Surgeons Guild. Fear returns, but so does method. The ledger of bodies and cures is kept neatly, and mortality drops. Stoicism has not erased sorrow, but it has trained a generation to resist panic by counting facts before tears. The city council now requires every merchant convoy to include a copyist who logs prices, illnesses, and road conditions. Those logs, gathered each Michaelmas, form a living atlas, borders tariffs and disease paths inked on calfskin. Tom, though half retired, is invited to annotate the grain routes he once drove. He chuckles at seeing his own hoof trail notes converted into Route 9 Miller's Way proof that a peasant's memory can graduate into cartography. Guillaume's songs still flutter across tavern rafters, but the verses have shifted. Courtly sighs now share space with paeans to prudent bookkeeping and tributes to healers who measure fever as minstrel measures pitch. One ballad tells of a young trader wooing a scholar by reciting Marcus Aurelius beside a dye vat. Audiences grin, recognizing Ellen and her Lombard banker husband in thin disguise. Romantic bravado has learned to tip its feathered cap to arithmetic. A new technology, movable type printing, arrives from Mainz, carried by a journeyman named Ulrich, who once apprenticed under Ulrich the smith. He sets up a press in the barn school's side room. The first local imprint is a pocket edition of Epictetus, paired with a plague handbook and a double-entry primer. The trifold volume, sold for the price of 2 candles, spreads across shires faster than any troubadour. Anselma, barely 16, composes its epilogue. Virtue tallies costs. Courage tallies risks. Love tallies none but chooses wisely, all the same. Trade winds veer yet again when distant Constantinople falls and Ottoman silk routes squeeze. Ellen's dye house pivots from indigo to woad, and Jorund arranges credit with Italian agents using letters of exchange whose clauses outlace any chastity belt of old. The coffer gains another drawer for stamped paper seals. Maud long frail smiles to see bureaucracy tamed into household order. Ranulph returns from a second campaign, limping but alive, bringing Greek medical scrolls translated by Andalusian Jews. Elias ben Raham, now gray, deciphers them in Werner's steamy side room, while bath attendants chart pulse counts. They discover a remedy for post-battle fevers that involves willow bark and cold compress early whispers of what future physicians will call salicylate therapy. The treatment spreads faster than rumor because the barn school prints the recipe in pamphlet form, binding each with a Stoic maxim. Pain is an opinion. Relief is applied knowledge. Lady Isabeau, aging yet keen, sponsors a public library alcove beside the bathhouse, its shelves stocked with these new prints. She donates her own crimson scrolls, the courtly love lyrics Guillaume first unrolled decades ago, so that earnest students may trace cultural lineage from sighing troubadour to data-driven printer. A placard above the shelves reads, "Wit, will, wisdom, check out all 3. Back at the cottage, Tom and Maud prepare to pass on the coffer. They summon Ellen and Jorund, place the iron key between them, and recite the wheel metaphor, many spokes each flexible. Then Maud adds a quiet codicil. If the wheel must cross oceans, pack extra spokes. She has in mind Anselma's dream of booking passage on a Genoese carrack to Seville scientific texts in one trunk, and sachets of homegrown lavender in the other. On Lammas Eve, a final feast gathers the village. Lanterns strung between the barn school and bathhouse illuminate a banner stitched by Ellen's apprentices, a cedar chest flanked by an abacus and a spray of rue. Tom stooped, yet strong leads the first dance step. Werner, white-bearded, semi-retired, fills mugs with rosemary ale. Brother Petrus, once the loudest, scold quotes. Seneca cheerfully, "Life is like a play. It is not the length, but the excellence of the acting that matters." Veterans toast with tin cups. Merchants haggle amicably over barley futures even as they stomp reels. Children chant multiplication into the smoke-lit sky. Later, Anselma rises to perform her own composition part. Ledger, part lullaby. She sings of goats by winter fires, of pennyroyal courage, of plague. Fires fought with calm of soldiers, balanced by song, and of a wooden coffer that grew compartments as the world grew wider. Her refrain folds philosophy into folk cadence. Count what you can love, what you must steer by the stars, no storm can rust. When she finishes, even the oldest faces glisten. As midnight bells toll, Tom latches the coffer one last time and kisses its lid. Maud, voice thin as reeds, whispers, "Send it onward when the season calls." Their legacy is no longer the chest itself, but the habit of making space inside it for whatever tomorrow demands seed or cipher herb or hypothesis. The children understand inheritance is a living ledger, credits and debits inked in courage rather than coin. Point 15 ends beneath that starlit dance where a peasant family's small wisdoms, once whispered under straw roofs, now sail on printed pages. Merchant ledgers and the steady hearts of a community that has weathered plague war love and commerce without snapping a single spoke. The wheel continues to turn, the spokes continue to flex, and somewhere beyond the dark horizon, another generation already waits to oil the axle with lavender, to test new roads, and to keep the ember of balanced living glowing against whatever winds may come. From straw-strewn cottages to press-inked ledgers, we have traced how medieval people steered desire-disease war and trade with equal doses of practicality and hope. Their wheel of survival herbs, numbers stoic calm, and shared festivals kept turning because every generation added flexible spokes instead of rigid locks. That lesson reaches us across centuries. Adapt fast. Record honestly, celebrate together, and protect the vulnerable ember of curiosity. If any story, practice, or quote from these 15 points sparked your imagination, drop it in the comments below and tell us how you might apply that medieval wisdom to your own 21st century challenges today.